Yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo-yay. They call me a drugstore cowboy, 'cause I'm jerking sodas all day. But I'm reading books on how to catch crooks, so I'll be a sheriff someday. Yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo-yay, yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo-yay.
Letter, special delivery.
Yippee!
Hot diggity dog. You big rat.
Sarsaparilla.
Yes, boy. Here you are.
Come here, you Get over here! Come on, back up! Come on, back up, you old critter! Dumb! Dig 'em up!
Drink hearty.
They call me a drugstore cowboy, 'cause I'm jerking sodas all day. But my horse Vanilla is a killer diller at chasing crooks away. Yippee-yi-yi, 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 yippee-yi-yi.
Cyberspace Cadets, Cyber fanbots everywhere, Americans. That's right, Indonesians out there on Odyssey, doing your own thing. I love it. It's all right, Prostate. It's Sunday. You know what that means? It's time for ice cream, everybody's favorite treat. Why do I call it ice cream, you may ask? I call it ice cream because most people consider ice cream to be a treat. And to me, a treat is having a good conversation with somebody that I'm interested in, somebody I want to know more about. And today's guest is no exception to that. I called her for the first time with Carlin Borshenko. I don't know if you know who that is, but and I was intrigued by her, what she's into, and we're going to get into this, okay? But the whole idea of abolishing public school system, it lit me up and made me smile and go, fuck yes, that's a great idea. Like you like. And so we did a thing on accelerated deconstruction, and Deb helped us out with that, and her and Tim hit it off. I mean, we were talking and I asked Miss Deb, I'm going to call her that because that's a Southern man saying hi to a person. Miss Deb is. I asked her if she did this show, and she said, "Yeah, man." And I'm totally blown away and excited. So today's guest is none other than the brain behind the reason that we learn, a channel here on YouTube. All the links and stuff are in the description on everything I've got. All right, Twitch, YouTube, and Odyssey. All three of you guys. All right, there's links to everything, her locals, Twitter, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you none other than the one and only Deb Fillman. You want to say hi, Deb?
Hey, everybody. Hard to see when I can be seen and when I cannot be seen. I guess I'm on the little TV set now.
Yeah, are you? Yeah, you are.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
everybody can see you. And
I got on TV. I actually was on TV once upon a time on 2020, but that was a long time ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. After 9/11, I was on.
Oh,
So.
Whoa. Well, it sounds like there's a story there.
Well, it's not that exciting, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So, I always start out the show. Well, I didn't do this for a long time, but like about 5 or 6 episodes ago, somebody said, why don't you ask as the first question the person's favorite ice cream flavor? And I'm like, holy shit, I've been doing this for like over 150 episodes, and I didn't think of that question. So, Miss Deb, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
My favorite flavor of ice cream is butter pecan.
Nice.
Yeah, I have a close second, which is mint chip, but butter pecan eclipses that. I would say I have to be in the mood for mint chip, but yeah. On any given day, I'll eat butter pecan.
Breyer's butter pecan, good stuff, man.
Good stuff, yeah.
That's right.
We got
All right,
kill wins up here, or down here.
Right. No Ben and Jerry's though, right?
No. Well, first off, they put too much crap in their ice cream, and I don't like all this like 75 things in my ice cream. That's just not, it's too much. So I like very basic flavored vanilla, chocolate, butter pecan, strawberry. Mint chip is as exotic as I'm gonna go. I don't even really like Rocky Road, to be honest with you. It's too much going on in there. But yeah, Ben and Jerry's is pretty much disgusting. I don't eat it. It's gross. And that's even without their politics. I don't like it. But no, I don't spend money on things that make money for stupid people.
I hear you. I totally concur with that too. Make sure the view page looks good. Everything looks good. Everything is happening like it's supposed to. I haven't boomered anything yet. I'm happy. So all right, so how long have you been on YouTube? This is the first question. So I've got a list of questions I'm going to ask them. And the first one's always, how long have you been around YouTube? What was the main reason you decided to come to YouTube? And what's the significance behind the name, The Reason We Learn?
Oh, these are good. Okay. So I started my channel probably back in, I'm trying to think, I want to say it was June-ish or around June of 2020. And I started it because I started making Instagram videos just commenting on things I saw going on, the riots and things happening with COVID. And what happened was after some of the riots, it hit me, they're going to be teaching this stuff in the schools. And the reason it hit me that way is that when my kids were still in public school up until, well, let's see, for my youngest, it was up until the pandemic. My other two came out a year and 2 years prior to that, respectively. They came back out, I should say, because they were homeschooled when they were little. Divorce, had to put them in public school, literally by law. And then they wanted to come out, so I was trying to get them out, and they came out at different periods. But I had waged a battle with their schools pretty much since they went in. I had to be super involved to make sure they were getting what they needed, because they were pretty much consistently not getting what they needed. And I became that mom. I was the mom that the teachers and administrators saw coming, and they were like, oh my God, here she comes. Oh my God, here comes that crazy woman and her questions. Because I was like Columbo. I was like the Columbo of moms at the school. Like, yeah, so I just have one more question, and they didn't like me. And I even tried to move them from one public school to a charter school. I kept trying to move them around within the system I was forced to use to get better results, and it wasn't really happening. And that's just academics for the most part. That was because I was really dissatisfied with just what they were teaching as far as basic stuff and the way they managed the classroom and their whole attitude. But after Trump was elected, so in 2016, it took a turn for the worse. And it went from just being really bad at teaching reading and math and all the things that obviously all parents care about. And it turned into lowering the flag to half-mast and everyone wearing black to school the day after the election, and a crying room, and a few other weird things that were going on, and teachers seeming to have meltdowns all the time over political topics. And I suddenly realized, hang on a second. I know there were a couple of teachers who wore their politics on their sleeve, but this became institutionalized to where the whole charter school was politics all the time. And so I was the annoying parent who was coming in and saying, I don't like this, you need to stop. And they gave me their song and dance about how it was necessary, and I argued with them and so on. So it hit me pretty fast after the riots. This is going to make it into the classroom, because just a year ago, they were doing a little Black Power march within the school for BLM, and that's before the George Floyd thing. They had to walk out for gun control. They had all kinds of things. And I said, oh no, this is not, no way are they going to go in with justifying rioting. Bad enough they had BLM in the classroom, bad enough they had all the stuff, but if they're going to start teaching our kids that this is the language of the unheard and mostly peaceful, I have a serious problem with that. Now, by this point, all my kids were out because of the pandemic, but I knew they were going to be doing it on the virtual school and stuff for other people's kids. So I thought, well, I'm just going to start making videos, letting people know, as a former educator in a classroom. Remember, I have a master's in education. I taught in schools just for a couple of years, but I was always a tutor. So I stayed a tutor. So I kind of kept my eye on what was going on, thinking maybe someday I'll go back, maybe if things turn sane. And then I taught my own kids and was fighting with their schools. So I kind of knew. And I thought, parents don't know. Because when I was doing it, I was all alone. I tried to go recruit other parents, come be active with me. They're like, oh, we don't want to rock the boat. No, it's fine, really. I don't want to get in trouble with my friends. And so I was like, all right, I'll go do it alone. And then now I realized this was more than just a squabble. This was a fight for the heart of the nation. This was I need to get other parents to understand that everything is at stake. It's not just they're learning a fake history. It's they're learning a fake history and they're going to turn into little communist revolutionaries and the whole country is going to crumble, right? It was all the way. So I started making videos and I had very low expectations. I knew my production values were low, as they still are. I knew that I was not a professional presenter. I didn't know anybody. I knew Carlin. That's it. And I knew Carlin because I was a member of her locals, and that's about it. She didn't really know me. She kind of knew of me a little bit because I was one of hundreds of members. But I said, what the heck? Why not? I'll just get on there. At least it's an outlet for me. at least I don't have to just scream at the walls, right? And I didn't like doing Instagram because it just felt too Zuckerbergy. So, I mean, bad as YouTube is, I just didn't want to be part of the whole thing. So I started doing YouTube, and I thought I'd explain about myself, my philosophy of education. I thought I would just put it all out there as far as who I really am and be 100% honest, not sugarcoat anything, because it was my channel and I could do that. And there wasn't going to be anybody telling me I couldn't unless I violated some rule, right? But I mean, as far as my opinions, I could speak the truth, what I felt was the truth. And I started that and started very, very slowly. You know, I'd be excited if 10 people watch my videos. Like, 10 people. And, you know, Carlin helped a little bit and said, hey, you got to watch Deb's stuff. And, you know, it helped a little bit. But for the most part, it just chugged along until a woman named Carol from a website called Never Lose Truth discovered me and made a video about me where she showed all of her members my channel, unbeknownst to me. I knew nothing about this till I woke up the next morning and I had like over 1,000 subscribers. And I went, what happened? You know, I was like, where did they all come from? Carol sent me. And I was blown away because it really was kind of the boost I needed to get, you know, get the message out there. And then I just started using Twitter and started associating myself with other people fighting for kids and fighting for parental rights, following them, broadcasting what I was learning from them. These are people who are now part of Moms for Liberty, Parents Defending Ed, No Left Turn in Education. Many of you probably heard of these groups. And while I wasn't literally part of any of the groups, I decided I'll use my platform to amplify what they're saying to another audience. So if we're all saying it and we're kind of just broadcasting it to different groups of people, it's like modern day pamphleteering. We'll get the message out to more people, and they'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and so on. Remember the commercials from when we were kids? So yeah, back in the day. And that's kind of what I started. Now, the story behind the Reason We Learn. The Reason We Learn title predates the YouTube channel. When I knew I was going to be like at home all the time, homeschooling my kids again, I thought I need to be able to do something from home that I care about. So let's see if I can help other people homeschool, because I know what I'm doing and I know how to do this. And let me hang up a shingle. I'll build a website and maybe people will need some help. They'll need some, you know, like almost concierge care, helping them find what curriculum would be right and so forth. And then I thought, well, what do I want to call it? And I kept thinking what's missing in education today is any focus on reason, logic, you know, like thinking. Like nobody's thinking. I looked around, I'm like, nobody's thinking. They're like reacting and emoting and feeling and, you know, all these things. But I didn't see a whole lot of real debate or reason. Like people sitting there going, let me see some evidence for that. Didn't see that. So I make that a very high priority in my thinking in my life is, you know, am I using my rational mind to arrive at these conclusions? I realize not everyone agrees with me, but one thing you can count on is at least I have thought it through. Like I've considered the evidence, and that's the conclusion I've come to looking at evidence. Your mileage may vary, but I didn't just feel it. I didn't just say, well, my feeling is this. No. So part of the reason I am like that is that I am mostly an objectivist. I'm not the kind of objectivist that is, you know, preaching the gospel of Ayn Rand, but I have read most of what she's written. And I do believe that, you know, we should be an evidence-based thinking people if we're going to remain free, because otherwise we're susceptible to manipulation and propaganda. And if we let our feelings rule the day, it's going to be even worse. I think, you know, you go by what you see, not what some authority figure tells you and so on. So reason was the missing link. And then I thought, well, why do we even go to school? Why are we supposed to learn? Why do we educate ourselves or our kids at all? Well, it's so that we're not one step above animals. It's so we're not just reacting to things. So we actually can use this thing that makes us different, which is our capacity for reason. That's why we do it. So that we can, you know, adapt to our environment, solve problems, survive, right? And so then I realized it was sort of a play on words. The reason we learn and the reason, the thinking capacity that we learn. You have to learn it. It's not automatic. In fact, I would argue public schools go out of their way to make sure you don't learn how to use it intentionally, so that you can just be triggered, like, you know, keywords, talking points. Okay, I will show up and protest. I will do what you say. I will get the thing. I will do the whatever. And that's not thinking. That's reacting. And that's the name.
All right, so I'm going to interrupt just for a second because that's what I see. I call this the moronification phase of going communist or socialist, right? There's always a phase where they dumb down the populace as much as they can, so they'll believe whatever they tell them, basically, right? What you're talking about is you're talking about people learning how to think instead of what to think, right?
Right, exactly. So some people in the comments are commenting on there's like a background noise.
Okay.
Is it coming from me?
It's probably me. It's probably a little rock and roll.
They're saying that they can hear music. I have you know that they're saying it's distracting. Just so you know.
And that noise was the sound. I just got somebody bought me coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
You call it the moronification. I would say, Yuri Bezmenov, we talked about before the show, calls it the demoralization. I call it intellectual kneecapping, because what they do, and it's what Hannah Arendt called, the aim of totalitarian education. It's not so much to teach you specific conclusions; it's to prevent you from being able to form any of your own. So all you can do is repeat back what you've been told, because you're not capable. You lack the background knowledge and the skills, the thinking skills and the actual skills of reading, writing, math, grammar, all the things you need, rhetoric, to be able to make an alternative case for something. So all you know how to do is pick the team you want to be on based on who you perceive to have more power or, stronger, whatever, and follow that herd. And it is almost like man-made retardation. And I don't use that word as a pejorative. I'm being literal in the sense that you have growth potential in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And if school gets in the way of that growth, the growth is retarded. It is impeded. And so you stop growing mentally and intellectually at a place, at a sort of mental age that would be years before you would otherwise stop, and your capacity for reason is not developed. And that is why you will see even well-educated blue checks on Twitter and so forth. They've got degrees galore, and they are, known to be influencers or, thinkers, speakers, talking heads. And yet when you hear them talk, it's like, do you really believe this? Or are you just repeating sound bites? Because the things they say are so nonsensical and not backed up by evidence at all. And they'll keep saying them. And they say them with such certainty that you feel like you're listening to someone who's in a cult or just, reading lines that have been given to them. They don't appear to be coming out of their own minds. And the way you can tell is you ask them simple questions about what they've just said, and they don't answer the question you just asked. They tell you something about yourself. Like, well, you're just a racist. Well, you're just that. Well, you know.
We go at home.
And that's not really what I asked you.
Right.
Is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's true.
Well, I mean, yeah, and it's like when I saw the whole, what they've done to mathematics. I can't remember what they call it, but it was like 5 or 6 years ago. They started teaching this bizarre kind of math where it was so confusing, like especially the word problems. If anybody in the chat can help me out with that, I appreciate you, because Uzi, my wife, knows my memory there.
Well, they started
Common Core.
to make
Common Core.
The Common Core was across the board. Now, here's the deal with the Common Core. What was happening is you had huge differences state to state in terms of what was getting taught and the quality of it and what the teachers were doing in the classrooms and so on. So the Department of Education, in its infinite wisdom, cough, cough, decided to, and this is George Bush and also Barack Obama, decided that they would have this thing called Common Core, where they would sort of create a standardized core curriculum. They can't make a national curriculum. They can't impose that, but they would give the standards that states could sign on to and say, we will follow the Common Core. And there was some money tied to that, but they would also have some learning materials. So teachers would know that if it was like plug and play, if the teachers went into the Common Core resources and picked some readings or picked some assignments, they would at least be doing that well. Doesn't mean it was great. It was just like, well, at least it's the basic, level. That was an attempt to prevent them from doing worse. Okay, because they saw some schools were doing even worse than Common Core. Some were doing much better. But there was to try to get, they didn't call it equity at the time, but it was to try to have them do about the same. And the problem is that, like anything else, if you try to make something common and basic, it's common and it's basic. It's not very good. It also has to be written for the lowest common denominator of teacher and of student. That's what happens when you have a large group of people in a room and you can't track them according to their abilities, because that's a big no-no, in public school, right? So all you can do is teach to the slowest or the lowest common denominator person in the room. That's all you can do. And then they also did something goofy with math, which is they incorrectly said that students need things to tie to their daily life. In order for it to make sense, they had to concretize it, make it concrete. Like, you have 10 cookies and I have 5 cookies. How many cookies do we have together? Except, guess what? Little bitty tiny kids actually learn the abstract faster and their brains are like sponges, right? So you can memorize like symbols that don't necessarily relate to anything more quickly than things that are tied to language. Because remember, they're still learning language at the same time. So now you're asking them to learn 2 things to learn 1 thing. So if instead you just have them memorize things like memorize the numbers, memorize base 10, memorize the math facts, they actually got farther, but it sounded good, especially to the untrained ear. Well, yeah, that seems to make sense if it's cookies and kids like cookies. And if they see the cookies, they probably learn quicker. Except it's not true. They gave rote memorization a really bad name, because rote memorization is not a great way to learn everything all the time. You learn that so you can then take that and apply it to higher order thinking tasks, right? But they were able to convince parents who didn't really know better, and even some teachers who were brand new at it, that this was the better way to go about it. It works really well for extremely high IQ people, right? I mean, in other words, you get a little kid who's gone to nursery school and they come in and they can already add all the things and do all the numbers because they learned it at home. Mm-hmm. Then yeah, they'll do great. You get the kid comes in kindergarten and they can't even recognize what a number 2 is. So they're still learning what number 2 looks like. Mm-hmm. They certainly don't understand the concept of 2. They don't get it. We assume, because we're adults, that if I look at this little block that has 2 things on it and I say this is 2, that means something to us. You give this to a little kid, they go, no, it's 1. See, it's 1. It's orange. Right? So that's the mistake. And this has been going on and on and on, because instead of having math people teaching math, they had teachers who probably washed out of a math program or didn't know math all that well at all. They're like, I want to be an elementary school teacher. And not to dog on, I was one. Okay, so I can say that. But having subject matter experts, probably a better idea, but they didn't do that, did they? So teacher education is a big part of the problem. And when Carter created the Department of Education in 1979, if you look at a graph of our results, that's when things started to do this. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that needs to go.
We were there for that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When it started, it's okay. All right. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go into some biographical questions, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
All right. And I love asking this question. So is there a food from your childhood?
Wait. Before you do this, Lou has joined the chat. Lou has entered the chat. Lou, dear, I should have spelled it out syllabically. I'm so sorry. The word, okay, legitimate is the word that the gentleman used. Now, I've looked it up since because we keep updating the dictionary, and apparently you can use legitimate as a verb now. It's like a new thing. But I'm pretty old, and when I was growing up and learning the English language, legitimate is an adjective. It was not a verb. The fact that they've turned it into a verb because a lot of people have misused it over the years is news to me because they keep adding to the dictionary. But I spelled it as it was spelled legitimate. You know, it's spelled the same way, legitimate and legitimate.
Yes.
But the guy said legitimate. So I went back in and I respelled it. And yes, concretize is a word. Sir, go look it up. Anyway, we can continue. Lou follows me around.
So is
and
Big Lee.
He follows me around and he trolls and he says things. And he has another name, I believe, that he goes and he harasses my guests privately on their emails too. Because he has nothing better to do with his life than follow me around and try to catch me in mistakes. First of all, I never professed to be like the know-it-all of everything. I already told you that I give you my opinions based on my research and based on evidence that I have found. Your mileage may vary. I encourage every single solitary person who ever watches me on my YouTube channel or reads my Twitter to please go do your own research. Please do it, but research. Don't go to your little pet friends who are all on the left and all agree with you and say, here it is. See, I've read the people who disagree with me, and I still disagree with them. You go read yourself some Thomas Sowell, and you go read some Walter Williams, and you go read the Federalist Papers, and you go read the Constitution, and you go read Marva Collins, and you read Mary Graybar, and then you get back to me, okay? Because I've read all the opposites of them. I've done it, and I've arrived at my own conclusions. So, Lou, run along. I'm about done with that dude. Well, he just loves to follow me around. Shows up at my comments. He hates Carlin. He's got a thing against Carlin. And so because of that, and because I know Carlin, he kind of like follows me around because apparently I've got like Carlin taint on me or something. I'm my own person. But whatever.
Well, that's one thing I ask of people in my chats is that please be respectful of my guests. If you can't do that, then I will yeet your ass, and you've been yeeted, Mr. Lou. So enjoy the comments.
Like I said, you can disagree with me, you guys, and that's fine. But he literally hovers around trying to play gotcha games with me. And I even went back in. The thing he's not telling you is I went back in on that tweet thread and I said, I totally didn't spell it out legitimate because then it would have been clear because legitimate spelled the same way. So right. I said legitimate is not a word because it didn't used to be. Did you know that legitimate was a word?
No, I did not.
Thank you. Apparently it is. Didn't know until.
Well, what about the uses of the term these ones?
Please. There are so many. I've given up. I've just at this point when I hear somebody on Joy Reid's show say a word that sounds like a malapropism, I've now resigned myself to believe it's probably in Webster's 5 minutes later as a real word.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever. And concretize actually is a word. But whatever. It doesn't sound like it is, but it is.
Dude, I feel you. You know.
Anyhow. So go back to your biographical questions.
All right. So is there a food from your childhood that you hated, but now as an adult you actually like it?
Tomatoes.
Okay.
Oh my God! I said that's the fruit God forgot to finish. I'm like, did you stop halfway? What happened? And then I couldn't stand them. Wouldn't go anywhere near a tomato, and now I absolutely love tomatoes. So
does that make ketchup? Does that make ketchup jelly?
No, well, yeah, right. It is a fruit, though. It is a fruit. I think it's a sauce. I think technically ketchup is a sauce.
Right. All right. Using one word, how would you describe your family growing up?
Dysfunctional.
That's a popular one too. Who would you say is the most influential person from your childhood, and what kind of kid were you?
My grandfather was the most influential person in my childhood. I was a very serious child until I wasn't. So like middle school, I became a class clown. But I think it was to make up for the fact that I'd been so very serious in my early childhood, and a lot of kids my own age didn't really like me because of it. Now it's the same. But the workaround or the coping mechanism I came up with in middle school was that I was just going to clown around a lot. was going to go out of my way to be a clown and do what the teacher said I shouldn't do, like comb my hair in class. By the end of 8th grade, my English teacher had a drawer full of my combs. So, and I passed notes and I did all that stupid stuff. I was what my dad called an underachiever, but I was a very serious kid early on. I took, adults liked to be around me, and I could have conversations with adults, and I often did. My grandfather liked to have conversations with me, so I learned a lot about history very early because he was born in 1896. He fought in both big wars, the First World War and Second World War, and didn't talk to me like I was a little bitty kid. Like, he didn't do the cutesy talk, and he didn't try to talk to me about kid-related things. He talked to me about the real world and life and what was going on and his life, you know, when I was or whatever. So to him, to me, it was like a walking history book, and I just loved listening to him talk. And so he was extremely influential in terms of my interests and what I studied in college, and everything was all because my grandfather made history seem so fascinating to me.
He could bring it to life, right?
Yeah. I mean, imagine being born before like the radio is a big thing, and then you see the space shuttle and, you know, all that.
It's amazing.
Kind of stuff.
Yeah, no doubt.
Pretty
It's an exciting era to be alive.
right,
Indeed.
exactly.
So do you have a favorite holiday or time of year that holds special meaning for you?
My favorite is Thanksgiving, and it's partly the food. I mean, it's definitely partly the food because I love to cook, and so I like to make all the Thanksgiving foods, especially the pies. I'm a big pie girl, love pie. So Thanksgiving meal is a lot of fun for me because the house smells so good and I can make all the foods, and we just have a good time with that. And I used to like, you know, what we used to call the Macy Day Parade, but it's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Mm-hmm.
And there used to be movies on TV on Thanksgiving. Remember back when it was like The Wonderful World of Disney, or they'd have like certain things at Thanksgiving that would happen year after year, like they'd play The Wizard of Oz, or they'd play certain movies that we as kids would be like, it's on that one time the whole year you can see this movie. And even though we'd all seen it 4 and 5 times, it was like a big deal. Yeah. Or you'd see Miracle on 34th Street, because at the end of the parade there's Santa Claus. So it's kind of like the anticipation of Christmas was more fun for me than actual Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just like that whole build up of all the cool, fun, festive, happy to be alive. Everything's great. And then the second reason is just what it is, that, you know, it's Thanksgiving. It's a day to be thankful. And I thought that's kind of cool. I sort of wish we had that more often. So it's my favorite. It's still my favorite.
Gratitude is the attitude. I like that. If you could go back in time and talk to little Deb at the age of 8, what would you say to yourself? What would you tell little Deb?
Don't go to college. No, I'm dead serious. I would probably say, I would say, stop caring. So, you know, don't care so much about what other people think of you, especially when you hit middle school and high school, and don't go to college. Find some other thing at least first, but don't go straight to college. That would be my advice. I went to college having just turned 17. I went because it's what you do. I had gone to prep school. My last 3 years of high school, I went away to boarding school. That's what you do. You go to college. I was a good student by that point because prep school turned me around and I was no longer an underachiever. But I had no idea why I was there other than to get A's. It was like, okay, I have this class. I will do as well as I can and I will get an A, but to what end? I mean, I still to this day don't understand what the whole point was. And if I had to take out loans, I mean, I was very blessed and my dad paid for it. It was also a heck of a lot cheaper back then than it is now. And I had no idea what the heck I was going to do when I graduated. It was over and I was just cast adrift. Like, all I know how to do is be a student. I don't know how to do anything else. I don't have any skills. I don't have any ambition. I don't even have any clue who I am other than student. So I would have told my 8-year-old self to like spend some time working and figure yourself out first, and then decide if you want to go to college or not. Mm-hmm. That's probably what I would do.
What was the craziest thing you did as a small kid?
Craziest thing I did. I don't know if I did anything super okay, it's not really super crazy, but I had a friend from the summer who went to the same place in the summer out on Long Island, and she knew Mick Jagger because she had babysat his kid, his little kid. I guess her name was Jade or something. And the reason she knew Mick Jagger was that her father was Larry Rivers. Larry Rivers was sort of a contemporary artist and pretty famous, I guess, at the time. I didn't know this at the time. I was just like, 15-year-old kid or whatever. And so we became good friends. And then when we went back to New York City after the summer, she said, "Oh, when you're home from school, you should you should come hang out with me, whatever." Well, come hang out with her meant get on the list to Studio 54. So she put me and my friends on the list at Studio 54, which for those of you who are not familiar with, it was a big club in the 70s by the early 80s. So this would have been like 1980. So it was starting to die out, 1980, 1983, like in that early 80s range. Mm-hmm. And she put us on the list of a nightclub. So I'm a 15-year-old kid, and I went with my friends to this nightclub where Andy Warhol and Mick Jagger and Jerry Hall and Bianca Jagger, all these people had been hanging out in the 70s and doing all kinds of drugs and things like that. No, I didn't do any drugs at all. I've never done drugs to this day. But we went there as young teenagers. And I think the fact that I have a 15-year-old right now, and there is no way in hell I would let my daughter go to a nightclub in New York City, and yet my parents allowed it. Oh, they allowed me to go. And I mean, at the time I thought like, wow, they're super cool. They're letting me go see my friends at Studio 54. And of course we didn't get any alcohol because we didn't have fake IDs. Yeah. So we are on the list. We're allowed to get in. I mean, Drew Barrymore got in there too, obviously, So if you're on the list, you get in. And we were in there and we danced. We actually danced, because in those days when you went to like a disco or whatever, you danced. And we went for the dancing. We literally went and danced. But I think by today's standards, most people would say that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, is that a 15-year-old kid went to Studio 54, not just once, but probably half a dozen times.
That's pretty cool.
And went dancing. But that's by far the craziest thing that I've done, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's really a great story too. It's like, that's why I do this show. All right. Because everybody gets like the Deb, that's like, the Crusader, etc. And it's like, that's a great little, that's the reason I do this show, stuff like that. Yeah, nice.
And it was, like I said, it was kind of on the way out. So I wasn't there in the drug infested heyday, but it was still pretty cool to be in a nightclub.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, there was a lot of booger sugar running around that place.
I'm sure that there was for sure. I was so weirdly innocent, though. Honestly, I didn't see or
think about it.
I really didn't think about it. We were there for the dancing, and we absolutely did dance. So,
well, all right. So, when's the first time you discovered that boys didn't have cooties?
Oh, I never thought boys had cooties. I was a tomboy, and I still never thought that. Well, I never thought they had cooties because they were my best friends. So, because I was a tomboy, I hung out with some of the neighbor kids on my block when I was younger, and I lived in New Jersey before we moved to New York City. The kids across the way, like 2 houses down, there were a couple of brothers, and they were some of my best friends. Like those 2 kids were my best friends. I had a next door neighbor, it was a girl who was a very close friend of mine, but she was super tomboyish also. And my best friends at school were boys. In 6th grade, I wanted to play soccer, but they didn't have a girls' team, so I played on the boys' team. And I liked it. It was like they were just very straightforward. They were good to me. They weren't mad that I was there. I was the only girl in the whole league, but they didn't care. Their mothers cared. Their mothers didn't like it, but they didn't have a problem with it. And my dad was the coach, or at least one of the coaches of my team. And I got the wind knocked out of me one day. Like the ball came in my stomach and knocked all the wind out of me. And I'm on the ground like this. And my dad's like, "Get up, you're fine. You're totally fine. Get up, everything's fine," whatever. And he's thinking he's going to go overboard being mean to me because he doesn't want the other team members to think that he's soft on his little girl or something, right? And they're like, "Your dad's so mean. What the hell? Why is he so mean to you?" So they were looking out for me. And I would say all the way through school, I was treated much better by the boys than the girls. Girls were really mean to me. I had my couple of female friends that were like also a little odd, or tomboyish or whatever. But most of like the pretty girls and the cliquey girls, they were nasty. And so boys didn't have cooties. As far as I was concerned, a lot of the girls were like, didn't want to have anything to do with them. No, not cool at all. And then as far as liking boys, like liking boys,
right.
I mean, like every other kid, I don't know, 13, 14, whatever, you start going, he's cute and whatever.
All right. So what about the first time you ever got shit-faced?
Oh, let me think. Really shit-faced, like drunk, like stupid drunk?
Yeah. That one that you remember like first comes to mind, right?
I'm trying to think. Probably, and I don't know. I was the least shit-faced of my friends, but we were sophomores in high school, so that would make me at that point about 14 or 15. Remember, I was young for high school, and we lost a soccer game that we should not have lost. It was in a semifinals of a tournament. There was no way. Our team got a little cocky, and we lost, and there was no excuse. And my roommate at the time was the goalie of the team. And then there was another girl who was on the team she was dating a guy who was actually a college guy who went to Columbia University. And I lived in New York City. So they were coming home to my house for the weekend after the soccer game. And we took a Peter Pan bus from Massachusetts to New York. And we found somebody to get us a little bottle of Seagram's about this big. And we had a 6-pack of 7-Up. And we took the 6-pack of 7-Up and we poured, the Seagram's like into the 7-Up.
7 and 7, yeah.
7 and 7s, right? And I didn't like it. So, I mean, I got drunk. I certainly got more drunk than I'd ever been. To that day, I'd had like half a beer. Like, what does beer taste like? Blech, it's disgusting, right? But then I tried this and I thought maybe it's better because it's in 7-Up. I like 7-Up, but it was so bitter. So I managed to get through one of them. That meant my 2 other friends that had 2 between them. Okay. Right. So they're like 6-pack or, they had more than that. I just had the one. Plus I was going home to my house. So I felt like, I had to be like not completely shit-faced. Well, my roommate got so drunk, she was throwing up in the bus bathroom. And then the other girl was pretty shit-faced. She was stumbling off the bus. Luckily, nobody got us arrested. Nobody said anything. Most of the people on the bus were laughing at us. That girl's boyfriend came, picked her up. She was fine. My roommate and I went back to my house, my stepmother, or apartment rather. And so I'm like holding her up to get her in the cab. I get to the door of my apartment, ring the bell. My stepmother opens the door and we were very close. She was like my mom. And she opens the door and she goes, "Oh my God." And she's like holding her nose. And then she starts laughing. She was 11 years younger than my dad. So at that point she would have been about 36 or so. Right. Mm-hmm. So she's like holding her nose. She goes, "Oh my God, it smells like a distillery," whatever. So she goes running to the end of the apartment to my dad's room. And she's like, "Jeffrey, you're not going to believe this." And I hear like this. And this is what I'm hearing at the end of the hall. Right. And I'm like, oh crap. So she comes back. I'm still holding up Wendy. And she comes and she takes her away. She goes, "I'll take care of her. Your father would like to speak with you." And I'm like, oh no, I'm so screwed. Right. So it was like the long walk. It was like a dead woman walking, and I'm walking down the hall. It was the kind of apartment with like a long hall and the doors off of it, but his door's at the end, like facing. And he goes, "Deborah!" And I'm like, so I walk in the room and he's sitting on his bed. And at the time he had kind of like a bed that was up high on another platform, like in the room. And I walk in and my head's down and he just sat there with his glasses like this, looking over his glasses at me for the longest time. And I'm waiting for him to speak and I'm waiting for him to speak. And he's sizing me up and down. And he says, "Were you drinking some kind of crappy alcohol?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" Like, what? "No, were you drinking alcohol? What were you drinking?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "What was it?" And I said, "Oh, Seagram's and 7-Up." And he goes, "How many times do I have to tell you if you're going to drink, you drink the good stuff or it makes you sick?" And I'm like, 0 times, exactly 0 times. I've never had this conversation with you. Where did you get the idea that you had this? I think he was just messing with me. I think he wanted to milk it for all it was worth, but then he unloads with that. And then he goes, "And don't drink on public transportation. You could get arrested," or something like that. Like, and then he throws that in. And then I was just kind of like, whatever. And the next day he sat me down and he talked to me about, you shouldn't have done that. And here's why, and so forth and so on. But at that point in time, I think he felt like, "You're so wasted. I can't have an intelligent conversation with you." But that I remember. Like, don't drink crappy alcohol. And you know what's weird? It stuck with me. And for the rest of my life, that was my lesson. That from that point forward, whether it was high school, college, whatever, if I couldn't afford like decent, like top shelf alcohol, I didn't drink it because
That's
I
great.
knew that it makes you physically ill and you have a terrible headache and whatever. So no, after that, I didn't drink hard spirits for a very long time in general. And then when I finally did, it was like, no, it's going to be the good stuff.
Right.
So that was what happened.
What's your favorite drink now that we're on the topic?
I drink bourbon, but I specifically drink an old fashioned. That is my drink of choice because the bourbon is what my grandfather drank. That was his drink, his medicine, as he called it. He drank a couple fingers of bourbon every single solitary day, and he lived to be, 94 or so, 93, 94. And I miss the smell. The truth of it is, like, I'd go visit him, and of course, for the occasion, we'd come visit. And for a while, I actually lived with him in New York. He had a big apartment, and so I lived in one of the rooms. But every evening, he'd sit down for his little drink, and so then, he'd kiss me goodnight. He'd like give me a hug or give me a kiss. I'm like, all right, go to sleep, get some rest, whatever. But I could he'd give me the kiss on the cheek, and you could smell it, like you smell the bourbon. So for me, it's like home. It reminds me of my grandfather. Plus, it tastes good to me now, but it's very nostalgic. That's kind of my little nod to history and tradition is to drink bourbon.
So yeah, old fashioned. I thought you were going to make an allusion to Don Draper on Mad Men.
No, he copied me. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Right?
No, not at all. No, I love bourbon, and that's been my drink of choice. I mean, I'll still drink a beer now and again, but it's still not my favorite. I'll go out and that's what I'll have. I do enjoy a good margarita, no salt, on the rocks, but it's got to be specific. It's got to be summer. It's got to be like specific mood, whereas I'll drink an old fashioned any old time. So
Sweet.
Not a huge drinker though, by the way. So in case y'all are thinking I'm some kind of a lush, it maybe is like a once or twice a month occurrence. So, and you'll usually see it on Twitter because I'll tweet a picture of it so you can see my drink.
All right, so let's shift gears and kind of get into a little aesthetics. So what was the first recorded music you purchased? Or first album?
Okay. The very first album I bought was Elton John, Captain Fantastic, and the Brown Dirt Cowboy.
What else on that? That's a good album. No, that's a real good album, actually.
Yeah, I bought that one, and then I think my second one was Chicago. And from there, I bought a bunch of Beach Boys. I went through a little Beach Boys phase. I was gifted one Valentine's Day. I woke up and my dad had brought me presents, and this is when he was in between like my mom and my stepmother. So he was single, and he probably had to confide in one of his girlfriends, like, "What do we get my teenage kid?" Or I wasn't even a teenager at this point. I think I was probably about 11 or 12, and I wake up and there's this wrapped gift, on my bed. I'm like, "What is this?" And I open it up, and there's Rolling Stones, "Sticky Fingers." You know that album cover?
Yeah, with the zipper. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, Dad, this is not appropriate. Here. But he was just trying to be cool. I think he was just like, well, they told me Rolling Stones was really cool.
That's a good album, man. No, Sticky Fingers is a good album.
It's a great album, but I'm just saying, like, the album cover is
the cover is like
a 12-year-old. Like, what the hell? Yeah. So yeah, there were things that were just not appropriate, but not in a gross way, just in a like, I don't really understand the generation. Is this what I'm supposed to get? Yeah. He didn't mean anything by it. He just didn't know better.
So, all right, what about what ended up like being your favorite go-to music, in your late teens, early 20s?
That's a really good question. I have very eclectic music tastes, so I don't know that I had a go-to. In my late teens and early 20s, I was partial to what you might have called, the prep school kids music. So I was listening to things like James Taylor, Janis Ian, Creedence Clearwater Revival, and that kind of stuff. But I also listened to a fair amount of AC/DC. I had that. The first concert I ever went to was the Doobie Brothers. Oh, so, wow. I mean, I also went to see, Remington, no. Rosington Collins.
Yeah.
And so like, and my taste was it was like all over the place. And the only music I did not listen to, wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole until I was in my 30s, and was country. And that was just a Northeastern bias, because I didn't even know it. I didn't even know country. I didn't listen to country, so I didn't listen to it enough to not like it. It was just one of those, all your friends are going, oh, nobody listens to country. Oh, I won't listen to country either. Oh yeah, me either. And we didn't know what we were talking about. I just never really heard any country music.
Right. So. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and right. I mean, every country was everywhere, and it was on TV
and then
all
in my
the
30s,
time.
I was pissed off, because in my 30s, I was like, what did I miss?
Yeah.
Then I went through this whole phase of like nothing but country music, because I had all this time. I had to catch up. Right. And I didn't mean country pop. Like, although I listened to a little bit of that, I went I went Conway Twitty back. I mean, I went
That's
like
right.
all the way back.
Good traditional stuff. Yeah. Good old country people thing,
Right,
yeah.
Right. And my 13-year-old loves Patsy Cline.
Oh yeah. My mom could sing just like Patsy Cline. Holy smokes. She had a great voice. Beautiful singer.
So it's very eclectic. The only thing I don't call music at this point is hip hop. It's not music, in my opinion. I'm not a giant rap fan, so it's kind of weird that I've done all the Tom McDonald's, I've done those reactions at the request of audience members who want to know what I think about the lyrics, about his bars, as they say. And so I listened to them. I'm like, well, he's got some good stuff, and let me put it in context for you of like what that means in education. And that's it. But the music itself, I'm like, some of them have catchy little, beats, but it's not my thing. Generally speaking, it's not my thing.
Right. Let's see. All right. So we're talking, getting a little bit of echo. All right. So all right. What about relationships, marriage, kids? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I didn't get married till I was 36, and I married somebody who was 6 years younger than I was, and that was probably one of several mistakes involved there. But we met at work, or at least at a work outing, and we both wanted the same things, as far as we both wanted kids and we both wanted family and all that. So it seemed, and he was very, very different from anybody I'd ever dated before. And a lot of my friends said, that's why you should seriously date him, because you're 36 and you're not married, and obviously you're attracting the wrong people. And so you should go out with someone very different than the people you usually go out with. And they were just wrong, because it wasn't a problem with the people I was going out with. It was largely a problem with me, that I had some leftover crap from childhood and just some self-esteem issues and other things. So, how I acted in relationships up to that point was probably not super healthy, and how the people I attracted were not super healthy because of it. Because when you're not okay in your own skin, and you have those kinds of lingering problems, you're not going to attract healthy people. You're not going to attract people that are really going to give you what you think you want, right? And so, yeah, he was really different in a lot of respects as far as what he liked versus what I liked. But that doesn't make for a lasting relationship either. We ultimately didn't have a lot in common. And what ended up happening is I realized about 10 years in that my husband didn't like me. And it's really what comes right down to it. He didn't like me, and probably in return, I didn't like him all that much either, that we just didn't have the same goals, passions, day-to-day interests for each other. We both loved our kids, and we both wanted, these kids, but we wanted very different things out of life, and we had very different expectations of each other and stuff. So that didn't work out. And that was tough, because I was homeschooling, and that was my dream, was to homeschool my kids. So I had to be happy as a person, as an adult, I had to upend life for my children, which to this day pains me. I hate that I had to do that, but I don't think it would have been good for them to have an unhappy mom either, or an unhappy dad for that matter. So it had to happen. The divorce had to happen, because, he's remarried, I'm remarried, to people who are much more appropriate for both of us. And thankfully, my kids are now homeschooling again, but it took quite a while, because one of the things we disagreed about was the schools. He let me homeschool while we were married, but as soon as we were not married, he was like, saw his opportunity and put them in the public school. And the court tends to agree with that.
Right.
So yeah, that was an unfortunate trade-off that I had to make. And like I said, it was very difficult, but that was that.
So how many kids you got now?
3,
Okay.
all girls.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I'm looking now. All right, let's talk about like authors. Do you like horror films or anything like that? No.
No.
Science fiction.
Some. It kind of depends on the science fiction, but I'm pretty picky about it. I tend to like historical fiction, historical drama, and or just totally ridiculous comedy. Science fiction, even like I like thrillers, especially if it's a really smart one where it keeps me guessing. I'm that annoying person who figures it out pretty fast, so I'll be sitting there watching anything that's got, like a whodunit or it's a thriller. And my kid, I'll say, "Oh God, I know who did it," or "I know what's going on," or whatever. And my kids will be like, "Stop!" Whatever. And I'll even start saying things like, "You know what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen next. This is going to happen." And they're like, they hate to see things with me. They're like, "We're not watching with you. You just go away. We don't want to watch with you." So if they can keep me guessing, and I'm like, that's good. That means, that I'm pretty psyched. But a lot of things are super predictable these days. So, but if it's a good story, I like a good story. And I don't think Hollywood tells good stories anymore. I like classic movies.
Yeah, they want to regurgitate stuff they know made money in the past.
And if they're lecturing me, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out. If I start watching a movie or watch a TV show and they get into this political stuff, I'm like, click. I want to be entertained. I don't need to be lectured. If I want that, I'll turn on the news,
Well, yeah, no shit. It's like the people don't understand. This is the reason at least I go to entertainment is to get away from that bullshit.
Exactly.
I just want to I do remember you talking about the Walking Dead.
I love The Walking Dead.
Right. And talked about, you were talking about Daryl and Carol, and you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, remind me what I said about Daryl and Carol, just because I want to be on the right track. But as far as, because I have talked about The Walking Dead a few times, and I just want to make sure I'm going down the right path and don't take a center rabbit hole. But I mean, the main thing about The Walking Dead is that The Walking Dead, I think, illustrates how, we are neither good nor bad. We are, to a certain degree, we have the capacity for both in each of us. And we do what we have to do to adapt to our environment to survive. And I've made the point on my channel multiple times that I think what may have happened to us culturally is things got too easy. We didn't really have to do anything to survive. So we started almost creating stressors, creating problems out of nowhere to feel like our lives were important, or, to create some kind of drama. I think the human animal sort of needs that to a certain degree. I'm not an anthropologist, so don't quote me, but I feel like people are to a certain degree drawn to challenges. They need that to feel alive. And what The Walking Dead has taught me is that you can go many different directions when you're in a situation where it's do or die. And this idea that we're either, all good or all bad is played out in that show. And I think what we learn from it is, no, we're not. We are a mishmash of nature versus nurture. When we're put in a situation where it's do or die, we make choices. And we make choices based in part on where we've come from, our childhoods, our experiences to date, based on the environment in which we are, based on the other people who are around us, and so on. And you look at a Carol, and you see Carol, who had an absolutely crappy time in her marriage, right? I mean, she was abused. She was a victim, if there ever was a victim.
Yeah, an alcoholic.
Yeah, just absolutely brutalized. And she lost her child in the worst possible way. And she, she had sort of one of two ways she could go, like suicide or become a survivor. And she became not just a survivor, but like a badass. She just grew into herself. And what that teaches me anyway, I think it's realistic in the sense that not everyone does that, but that it is possible. And that you have to make a decision who you're going to be and what you're going to do. And what I see happening, for example, in our schools, is we're teaching that is not possible, that your circumstances define you, that your birth, what you're born, these accidents of birth define you, that they're deterministic. I don't believe that. And I think The Walking Dead shows us that they're not. You make choices every single day about what you're going to do and who you're going to be. And if you look at the different groups of people, you also see that. you see that there are groups of people who just became like feral, right?
Right.
Remember those they were just like wild animals attacking
Mm-hmm.
people. And then you had groups of people who said, no, we're going to try to keep civilization going
Yeah.
intact, and this is what we're going to do. And there's a lesson there, and the lesson is that even when things are really, really bad, if you share these core values, these core principles, and you make some rules that you all agree to abide by, and you enforce them, and people are accountable for them, then you can preserve the trust that is at the core of all civilization. Civilization doesn't exist without trust. Right?
I always thought the motivation behind the governor looked like a lot like Hitler, and the motivation behind Negan looked a lot like Stalin. Right?
Yeah.
It was interesting to see. And if you read the comics and Kirkman, Carol kills herself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she tries to fall in love and she can't fall in love, and then she ends up trying to make out with the zombie. It was
wow.
weird. It was crazy. She went crazy.
Okay, well, yeah, they think I've not read them, so I did not know that.
Yeah,
but
I love what they've done with the whole flip on that, and the creation of Daryl. They're two like really iconic kind of characters in their whole journey that they've maintained. I think their sense of self. We've always known who they are, and that whole duality, the aspect that we are, devils and angels at this, combined. And if you ignore the dark part of yourself, I call it embrace your darkness, your own personal darkness, then you're more in danger of being, falling prey to it.
I would say that that's true. Somebody was explaining to me the other night, like the real origin of Halloween as an example, that it was kind of one day, even though they base it on some things like All Hallows Eve and whatever, but the celebration of it where you sort of dress up as demons and so forth and run around the neighborhood, was, as I was told, like a Christian thing where it was like one day to go illustrate what things would be like if we let the dark part out. It's kind of like the people, you have these little demons running around. It was like to let your little demons out. And I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what I was told. But I think it's a way of acknowledging that that's in there. None of us, anybody who says, I would never, doesn't understand that never is a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And you don't know what you would do in certain circumstances if they were presented to you. And I think, as you pointed out, with the Hitler thing in particular, we look around now and people say, I'll say things like, the language that we see in some of these lesson plans is genocidal. I'll go right out and say it.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're going to say this entire group of people is evil because they are white, for example, they'll say whiteness is this, and we need to decenter whiteness, or we need to abolish whiteness, and they'll say things like that. Then you're using genocidal language. When you start comparing people to vermin, okay, you start comparing people to rats and cockroaches and even in jest. Like my daughter will tell me that on TikTok, they refer to people like her as snow roaches. They'll say, oh, you're a snow roach. And that, I don't think it's funny, because that kind of language, when it starts to take hold, makes it easier. You're dehumanizing other human beings.
The Judenrate.
Exactly.
It's dehumanizing. Exactly.
Dehumanizing, and it makes it a lot easier. And that's why you see, people who disagree with us are domestic terrorists, or people who disagree with us are evil. If you have to do that to, advance your argument, not only does that prove you have no argument, but the people on the other side of that are justified to be afraid of you, because that's not to be joked about. Like when you can start equating people to rats and cockroaches and things like that, which we tend to want to exterminate, and you start, and or there's the clean and the unclean,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we're hearing now. This is genocidal, and people say, oh, that will never happen. You're paranoid, you're a conspiracy theorist, that could never happen. I'm like, so you're telling me that millions of Germans were just innately evil? They were just naturally evil people? Or do you think maybe they were taken hold of by bad ideas and it harnessed the dark inside of them,
Mm-hmm.
or persuaded them that the dark was actually the light, and they didn't think what they were doing was evil at all? And that's why you have to acknowledge that it is possible. Anything is possible. It's like the people say in a marriage, don't say I'll never cheat. Say I commit to never cheating. There's a big difference between, oh, I would never do that. It's like, you really don't know. Just make a commitment that you won't. Choose not to.
Right.
But don't say it's not possible, because, you know, like you have to make these conscious choices if you're going to be this kind of person or you're not going to be this kind of person, so that so that when you start to see things that are appealing to you, I say this to people all the time, if the message is too appealing, if it sounds too perfect, if you like want to jump on it and go, gotcha, see, you know, step back and say, wait a minute, is this true? Because it's a little too perfect. It fits the narrative that I want to be true a little too much. That's when you should step back and say, I gotta look and check this out and make sure it's really true.
Yeah, look for the bullshit.
Look for it, because because you got different people. Like, there's no like only one side, right? And they're not necessarily equal. Don't hear me equating them, but they're people who try to make hay on both sides of every argument, right? So there'll be people who try to get you to believe, you know, something crazy over here. I saw it today where someone it was a vaccination station, like outside of school, right? And of course, I have my views about that. I think that's bad, but on the side of the station, it said, don't forget to donate your children's organs. And I looked at it and I went, no. And somebody had written on it, what? Like, see, they're coming for your children, right? And as much as I'm opposed to what they're doing, I said, this is too over the top, right? So I was zoomed in, and sure enough, it was photoshopped. Like, you can see like the outlines. And so I wrote under it, I wrote fake. And, you know, people were jumping on me and be like, but they do this stuff. And I'm like, they don't do this. Like, and in fact, it's why you should be scared, because they don't shove it in your face quite this much. It would be easy. Most people would be appalled, but they make it all soft and squishy and nice. So you get sucked into thinking it's fine. That's what actually makes it dangerous, is that they're not saying we want to harvest your organs. Okay. And I'm not saying they do. I'm just saying that it's not going to be that upfront. It's not going to be that obvious.
Right.
You need to just question authority and look at the facts. The facts are damaging enough. You don't need to embellish. So, but I think with The Walking Dead, it kind of shows that if you want to stay free, if you want to be a free person, you have to decide where you stand on authority. And accept the possibility that maybe you don't really want to be free. Like I do. But what I'm learning about my fellow Americans, too many of them, is I don't think a lot of them do. I think a lot of them think freedom is scary and messy. I don't, but I think a lot of them do. And I'm starting to hear them say things like that. And look at some of the communities in The Walking Dead. They said the same stuff, right? But out there, what could happen? Yes, but in here, you're like, you know, like kissing butt to a supreme leader or to weird rules or whatever. And they're like, I don't care, I have food. I don't care, I have medical care. I don't care, I'm safe from the things. Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the complacency. I think that that people are afraid that that if they're given agency, true agency, that they'll make the wrong choices. They're afraid of that, right? And I say, you know, it's like, hell, if you made a wrong choice, you still made a choice. You can always bounce back from mistakes.
Exactly. And you know what, a big lesson I learned in life, and I try to teach it to my kids, and I'm trying to, you know, broadcast it out too, is that it's actually very liberating and easy to admit you're wrong. Like, part of why people like Lou piss me off is that I am a person who admits when I'm wrong. Even right there in that same thread that he called out, oh, do as I say, not as I do. You mean like later in the thread when I admitted that I spelled it wrong, or that I didn't pronounce it the way. So it's easy. It's really not that hard. You're free, because now what are people going to say? You're just like, point well taken. You're right. I didn't notice that. I was suckered too. And what are they going to say now? Then people are like all ready to get you, and you're like, you're right. That's a good point. Didn't think of it that way. And then people go, blah, blah, blah. They're not expecting it. right? And it's not why I do it. I'm just saying, like, I don't understand people who won't. I don't get the people, and you see them everywhere. People are like, no, I'm right. You're crazy. You're wrong. You're bad. You're racist. You're like, let me throw every insult in the world at you because God forbid I should admit that maybe you have a point. Give you like a tiny, no ground given, no disagreement allowed. And that's got to be an exhausting way to live. I can't imagine living like that. That to me would just be so stressful to have to be right. And I think what they're doing to our kids right now, of making, a different opinion evil or a different opinion like dangerous, is they're putting them in a state of perpetual stress that their identity, their very being, is tied up in their opinions. My being is not tied up in my opinions. My opinions have changed over the years and certain things, and other things not so much, but I leave them open to evolving. I'm open to new evidence. If you bring something to me that shows me, I doubt this will occur, but let's leave open the possibility. If you brought me data that showed that teaching critical theory to children improved their reading skills, improved their math, improved their science, improved their self-esteem, improved their life outcome, if you could actually bring me evidence of that contradicted every gut instinct I have, plus all I know about children, plus everything I've learned about learning, plus all of my life experiences, plus what I know about postmodernism and communism and so forth, I'd still look at it. I would look at it. Can't promise you anything, but I'm not going to go, right? But if you bring the critical theorist, Thomas Sowell, and you say, well, why don't you take a look at this? Or if you bring them, even just Ayn Rand, some opposite philosopher, right? Not a postmodernist. They're like, get away! It's Satan!
And that's exactly what I was going to point out. It's like a cult mentality.
Yeah, you cannot handle it. There's no discussion at all. None. They're right, you're wrong, period, end of conversation. This is the way, the truth, and the light. Be gone with you, demon. It is like talking to people who are in some kind of fundamentalist cult.
Yeah, absolutely. That, and it's and if you try to point that out to them, man, that really will light some people up, with negativity.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm a little dyspeptic there.
Okay. I mean, I still get people, I think they've dispatched a bunch of trolls around YouTube and Twitter to say the exact same thing. Like, you people just don't want a true history to be taught. You just are racist. You just want to preserve your white privilege. You just did it. There is no CRT in schools. And I'm like, really? Okay.
Holy smoke.
No, I mean, like, you could show them all the receipts under the sun, and they're going to come back at you and like, you just don't want, you just this, you just that. And it's the same phrases over and over again. And I'm just at the point where I'm like, block, hide, block, hide, block, hide. Because they're just trolls. I mean, that's not an argument. You're just a racist. You just don't believe in history is patently false. So.
And that's, that's like a point of view that I came to is that there's really no real discussion going on here. It's like people saying, I'm right, you're wrong. And you're saying, the same shit back to them. And there's no exchange of ideas.
No.
And that's kind of where I get, why I gave up on like debating and shit like that, because it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Whatever you come up with, they're gonna dispel it. Even when you call them out on their double standards, and that's what gets me more than anything is the rules for thee, but not for me. That whole attitude.
That's just their stock and trade. I mean, hypocrisy and projection are all they do. And the good thing about having studied history is that I know that this is part of the playbook. This is I used to get more frustrated about it until I remembered. I'm like, oh yeah, right. Rules for radicals, Sun Tzu. Like, I mean, they're just following a pretty standard playbook of how to, divide, conquer, demoralize, conquer some more, all that. And so once you realize that and accept that these are not honest debaters or anybody. Like, these are not people that you can even speak with. And so you go past them and you go to the people who are still actually thinking and using their brains. And I do believe, this is the optimist to me, I believe those people are the majority. I think that's not to say that the majority are not cowards. There's a big difference between being a person capable of reason and being a person capable of reason who has the guts to use reason and then open their mouth to express the rational conclusions they've arrived at, publicly or any other way. There's a lot of people who are like, look, dude, I don't want to lose my job. I just, yeah, you're right. This stuff is crap. I don't agree with it. They're a bunch of crazy people, blah, 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 whatever. But, I just got to keep my head down, or my mother-in-law doesn't agree with me and I want to hear about it, whatever. So, and when I say coward, I'm not trying to be insulting. It's just an observation, that there are only so many people willing to stick their neck out and risk their livelihood and risk their stuff. And it's understandable. That's just how most people are. And it just is what it is.
Well, and they're being bombarded by what my friends call fear porn all the time. I mean, just 24/7.
They're just trying to live their lives and get, I hope nobody hears me judging. Okay. What I'm saying is just that those of us who don't have that inclination, who are like possibly, too ballsy for our own good, we're just like, oh, look, that emperor's naked. I mean, those of us who are willing to be the little boy on the side of the road, calling out the naked emperor walking down the street. I mean, we sort of have to just do it. That I felt like with my YouTube channel, I felt like I had almost a moral obligation to open my mouth and use my freedom of speech as long as I could. And if nobody watched, fine. If a lot of people watched, fine. Like, whatever happened, at least I could feel whatever happened, like I tried. I wasn't afraid, and I did what I could, and that's all I can do, right? And I do also believe that it's not the first person that starts a movement or that makes something catch on. It's that second and third person. So you have there was a little video that was going around for a while where there was one guy standing on a hillside and he's dancing like a crazy person. He's like, like dancing almost to like non-existent music.
Right.
And most people sitting there on this hillside were kind of like looking at him, and one person got up and went over and started dancing with him. And then another person did it. And after those two people came up to that first person and you had three people, it was like the whole hill. Everybody got up and started dancing. They felt like, oh, other people are doing it? Okay, cool. I'll do it too. So that was my second motivating factor, was maybe if I do it and people see me that I'm just like a regular average person, there's nothing special or exotic about me or extra knowledgeable about me. I'm a mom, I'm a homeschooler, I taught in school for a while, I know a little bit about this stuff, but basically I'm one of you. I'm really not that different from most people. I thought maybe people would say, she's kind of like me. I feel like I have things in common with her. She's not that inaccessible. I could do that. So either they would start their own platforms or use their own voices or go to school board meetings, do whatever they're going to do, or they would just share what I was doing with other people and kind of make use of my voice if they didn't have one of their own. Right. And we could just spread it that way. Like I said, modern day pamphleteering. But that's what it takes. And those of us who feel strongly about this stuff just have to keep speaking. We just have to keep speaking. Look what happened last week with that election. That's what happens when you open your mouth and you actually use your voice and you speak up and you don't just hide and say, I'm afraid people won't like me or people are going to be mad at me. Which people? Crazy cult-like people who want to tear down the country and destroy it and replace it with who knows what? Because that's really what's going on. So in my opinion, anyway, I think they would like to just get rid of the Constitution, get rid of equality under the law, get rid of everything that we hold dear, and replace it with some kind of imaginary utopia, which of course it won't be. It would just be another, Venezuela or Soviet Union or China. Right. Most likely China.
Be a shitload of dead people.
It would be, yeah, there would be. And so I'm hoping that we don't get to that point, that enough people start using their voices and waking up and doing, and it's not just voting, guys. It's not just, I don't actually believe there's a political solution to this because politics is downstream from culture. Are you still there? I hear nothing now.
I'm here. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So what I think is it's living your life, like live your life. So instead of worrying about what you're going to do and, do I need to do this or not? Go be a free person. You don't need to wait for permission to be free. Just go do it. And that holds true with education. I see so many parents like, but they're doing this and they're making my child do that. And they're making my child like, no, they're not making your child do it. Technically speaking, you are, because you still have a right to not take your kid to that school building. And they'll say, but that's hard. I'm like, well, which is harder? Dropping your precious child off with a bunch of strangers who do not have his or her best interests at heart and really don't like you. If you disagree with them, they really don't like you, and they're going to actively try to drum out of your kid anything you try to put in there. So is that hard? Because see, that was hard for me. I felt like a child abuser every time I dropped my kids off at the school. I just had no choice, literally, because the court would have put me in jail. But if that's not your situation, if you don't have an ex who's saying, I will have you put in prison for contempt of court, then maybe you need to choose your hard a little differently, because you have the freedom. You do. You absolutely do. And we know that because homeschooling has tripled in a year.
That's amazing.
So people are doing that. People are saying, you know what, I was already unemployed, or you know what, I'm going to be employed anyway because they're going to make me get that thing and I don't want, or you know what, we've been getting by on this little fragment of an income for the last year or 18 months, whatever it is, because I had to stay home because I had to watch the kids because they were home on virtual school anyway. So you know what, we're just going to stay. We're just going to stay home. Or you know what, I know a few other people in the same boat as me and I do shift work. So we're going to trade off, and I'm going to do Monday and Tuesday. They're going to do Wednesday, Thursday. We're going to figure it out because guess what? We're Americans and that's what we do. We figure shit out.
Right.
That's the advice I give people. I'm like, is it easy? No. But I just happen to think it's harder to turn my children over to people who go, what gender would you like to be today? I find that more difficult. That's just me. I'm weird, I guess.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
6-year-old.
All right. So, all right. We got a hard stop at the top of the hour, right?
Yeah. I got to go get the kids.
All right. So I usually do. All right. I don't know if you remember a show called Inside the Actors Studio.
Yes.
Yeah. James Lipton.
Yes.
I do the 10 questions, and because right when this COOF thing started, he passed away, but it wasn't from the COOF. It was like he was like 96 years old. He was, he'd been doing that for years.
Right.
And so here's the 10 questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What is your favorite word?
Liberty.
Not concretize?
No.
What's your least favorite word? Sorry.
MOIST.
Nice. All right. So what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally? What gets you fired up?
Nature, like going out on a hike.
Okay.
In the mountains.
Well, all right. So what turns you off creatively?
That is a really hard question. Pettiness, like petty people. I don't like petty, nitpicky.
All right. What's your favorite curse word?
Fuck. Has to be my favorite. I use it an awful lot.
There's a lot of applications. Let's see. All right. So what noise or sound do you love?
That is a really hard one. The sound of my children's voices recorded from when they were little.
Oh, wow.
Like I say, I have little videos. Thank God. I can't imagine what parents went through when they didn't have that, but I love to rewatch those videos. It's my favorite sound. Like when they're 5 years old, 6 years old, something like that.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Very loud music. Like when it's not music anymore, but like screaming. Like that kind of, I don't like that. I can't stand it. It's just, I kind of want to go like this.
All right. What profession other than, I guess, teaching, since that's what you did, would you like to attempt if you could, you had your druthers?
That's really difficult. I wish I could have been a finished carpenter, like a furniture maker kind of carpenter. I would love to have tried to make things with wood.
Sweet. That's awesome. All right. So what profession would you not like to do?
Lawyer.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Your grandfather's been waiting for you.
Oh. He sounds like a very fascinating guy.
He's the best.
He definitely lit you up, and he would be very proud of you, I think, right now.
Well, I hope so, but he was a tough cookie, but definitely my hero.
All right. Do you have any strange collections?
I don't think they're strange. I collect elephants.
Okay.
But I don't have that many anymore. I mean, I did, and then I kind of stopped, but I was collecting elephants for a while.
All right, and chat. We're not going to be able to do the questions today, but I did put a poll up. All right, and this was: should public school system as it is today be decentralized or abolished altogether? 40%. This is out of 57 votes. Say decentralized, and 60 say abolished.
Alrighty.
So, yeah,
I'll take it.
Yeah, it all ends up at with the same goal, and decentralize it, then you abolish it.
Yeah, well, put it this way: if you decentralize it, truly decentralized it, it would already be 100% better.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, in my opinion, the abolitionist in me is committed to abolishing the compulsory nature of it, in the sense that right now you're compelled to pay for state-run education, whether you use it or not. And if you don't have means to afford something else or do something else, you're compelled to attend the school they assign you to. And there's really no other thing we do in our life that is that much of a grab bag, where you give your money first. You don't give, you're forced to give money first, and you get whatever they give you. If you had to get groceries that way, you would starve. So that's what we're doing with the most important gift we give our children. It's not just the lessons they learn in the classroom. Remember, this is 13 years of their life. It is the shortest period of their life. It's their childhood. You're giving them a childhood when you pull them out of that. So when I say abolition, I want to abolish the state's stranglehold on parenting.
Wow.
In childhood.
Indeed. So, all right, here's a question. Is there anybody's channel on YouTube that you would like to promote that you don't think gets enough love?
I'm trying to think of somebody that is producing enough that they should. There is one called Hold My Drink that I think is excellent. It's a podcast and YouTube channel, so you can also listen to it if you don't want to watch. And I think they have some great topics, great guests. Jen, who's the host of it, is really good, and I think it's undersubscribed, in my opinion. I think they do some great work, and more people need to listen.
Cool. So, all right, so this is the point where you show your channel. All right, all the links are. Let's see what I got in here. Make sure I didn't miss anything. I've got your Twitter, your YouTube, your locals, and Patreon. Yeah.
Patreon is just another way for people if they want to support me financially. There's no content there. And most of my content that is behind a paywall that you might be interested in would be locals. I have 2 Zoom calls a week where people are interested in homeschooling and want to learn more or just get support. If they're supporters of my locals, they get to attend those Zoom calls.
That's cool. And everybody, I'm looking at migrating to locals myself. So I think there's an inevitability that people that like to think things that YouTube doesn't like and say things will eventually be deplatformed, or as I say, yeeted.
Eventually.
All right. So you've got something coming out like in a couple hours?
Yeah, so what's going to happen at 8:00? I'm having
That's Eastern.
8 Eastern time. Truman, I don't know who's my mundane mind on Twitter, but he also has a channel called Return to Reason. Truman will be on, and Truman is going to be talking some more about his experience working in public schools in Wyoming. He worked in the behavioral side, and he's been on twice talking about his experiences working with kids who had learning disabilities and then behavior problems and so forth, and some of the corruption and the mismanagement and the incompetence there. So he gave the background in the 2 videos that are already on the channel from, months ago. But something happened to one of his former students, and he is going to, well, long story short, the kid committed suicide.
Holy shit.
And he makes the case that the school played a gigantic role in what happened to this kid, and it was completely unnecessary. So he's going to be talking about that, and he's going to be reading a letter that he's writing to those who are in power and in charge of it to essentially let them know that he holds them accountable for this kid. And he's going to explain why to the audience. And I really think it's an important show because we talk a lot about critical theory. We talk a lot about, all the Marxist stuff in schools, but we don't spend enough time, in my opinion, talking about the academic failures, and not just academic failures, but the way they are warehousing kids who are struggling academically, labeling them with behavior problems that they may or may not have. And then the kids who do have behavior challenge, problems, are often because of their learning challenges, are treated so poorly, they're abused. In many cases, they are abused. And kids who otherwise might have been fine in another environment with better teachers, with properly trained people who actually cared, not the state, they might have been thriving, but we'll never know. And tragically, a fair number of them end up dead or in prison.
Pathetic. It's
It's
sad.
really bad. And so, like I said, it's all sexy now to talk about critical race theory and whatever, and we do, and that's important. But we have to remember that there are kids forced into the system and forced into classes every day that are just abusing them, absolutely abusing them. So he's going to talk about that.
Can you imagine what it's like to be a kid in today's, I mean, my God.
Where do we get off thinking it's normal to tell our young children, our 6-year-old, who's before that has been like home and, like everything, can I go to the bathroom? You don't have to ask permission. They're like, I'm going to the bathroom. I'm going to do whatever. We tell them it's normal to ask a grown-up if they can go to the bathroom, and then it's normal if they say no. We're just think of that one thing, just that one discrete thing. So every other thing flows from that. When they have control over your bodily functions, and then you say like, oh, you're going to learn from these people, and you're going to learn all the things you need to know to be a successful, well-adjusted adult in this environment that is more like a prison than it is like any other place in your life. The premises we accept as normal are actually really abnormal for our children. And what I'm hoping to do is continue to hammer that point and say, ask yourself why you think this is normal. This is not normal. This is not healthy. This is not good. And just because you survived it doesn't mean that it's a rite of passage for your kid. I wanted better for my children than I had.
And yeah. So this is a point where I have to thank you so much for being a guest. I had a ball. I don't know about you, but it goes by way too fast when I'm having too much fun. But I do appreciate your energy and your dedication to this, to this crusade, and I back you 1,000%.
Thank you.
Well, and let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to everybody. It's your turn now, Miss Deb.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you for watching. And, sorry about that little outburst in the beginning with Lou. I just think that person gets on my last nerve. So, and I thank you guys for being